The head of Britain's GCHQ spy service says that new intelligence showed some Russian soldiers in Ukraine had refused to carry out orders, sabotaged their own equipment, and accidentally shot down one of their own aircraft. It comes as a United States official said President Vladimir Putin has been misled by military advisors reluctant to reveal the scale of losses suffered in. Government Communications Headquarters Chief Jeremy Fleming said President Vladimir Putin had massively misjudged the capabilities of Russia's once mighty armed forces while underestimating both the resistance of the Ukrainian people and the resolve of the West, which has punished Moscow with largely coordinated sanctions. Putin has massively misjudged the situation, Mr. Fleming said in a speech at the Australian National University in Canberra, according to a transcript of his remarks. We believe Putin's advisors are afraid to tell him the truth. Citing new intelligence, Mr. Fleming said there was evidence that Russian soldiers had low morale and were poorly equipped. We've seen Russian soldiers, short of weapons and morale, refusing to carry out orders, sabotaging their own equipment, and even accidentally down their own aircraft, Mr. Fleming said. News agency was unable to independently confirm GCHQ's analysis. GCHQ, which gathers communications from around the world to identify and disrupt threats to Britain, has a close relationship with the US National Security Agency and with the eavesdropping agencies of Australia, Canada and New Zealand in a consortium called Five Eyes. Russia's Defense Ministry says its armed forces are professional and carrying out their duty in Ukraine with considerable success. It says the West has spread lies about the operation in an attempt to bring down Russia. A US official, citing declassified US intelligence, said, "We have information that Putin felt misled by the Russian military. Putin is being misinformed by his advisors about how badly the Russian military is performing and how the Russian economy is being crippled by sanctions, because his senior advisors are too afraid to tell him the truth." The official said Mr. Putin had been unaware that conscripts were being deployed to fight in Ukraine, where Russia has suffered huge personnel and equipment losses. There is persistent tension between Putin and the MOD, stemming from Putin's mistrust in MOD leadership, the official said. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, asked about the intelligence while traveling in Algeria, said that in autocracies, you don't have people in those systems who speak truth to power. Ukrainian soldiers patrol next to a destroyed Russian tank in the village of Lukyanivka near Kiev on the 30th of March 2022. Source: AFP. Ronaldo Skemet. Ukraine braces for new Russian offensive. It comes as Ukrainian forces are preparing for new Russian attacks in the east of the country as Moscow builds up its troops there after suffering setbacks near the capital Kiev, President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Thursday. Russia's invasion of its neighbor, now in its fifth week, has driven around a quarter of Ukrainians from their homes and brought Russian-Western tensions to their worst point since the Cold War. Tough resistance by Ukrainian forces has prevented Russia from capturing any major city, including Kiev, where a Russian armed column was held back for weeks. At peace talks this week in Istanbul, Russia said it would curtail operations near Kiev and the northern city of Chernihiv to build trust. But Ukraine and its Western allies, including the United States, dismissed Russia's pledge as a ploy to stem its losses and prepare for other attacks. Russia says its forces are regrouping to focus on liberating the breakaway eastern Donbass region. In an early morning video address, Mr. Zelensky referred to Russian troop movements away from Kiev and Chernihiv and said that was not a withdrawal, but rather the consequence of our defenders' work. Mr. Zelensky added that Ukraine is seeing a buildup of Russian forces for new strikes on the Donbass, and we are preparing for that. A soldier comforts an elderly woman evacuated from Irpin, on the outskirts of Kiev, Ukraine, on Wednesday, the 30th of March 2022. Source: AAP, APA Rodrigo Abd. Moscow has cultivated close ties with pro-Russian separatists controlling swathes of the Donbass region, which encompasses two self-proclaimed People's Republics that Russia says it is helping to free from Ukrainian control. The leader of the Donetsk People's Republic, Denis Pushilin, said on Wednesday that offensive operations were intensifying. "We are well aware that the longer it takes us to liberate our territory, those settlements that are now under control of Ukraine, the more victims and destruction there will be," he said. Donetsk includes the besieged port city of Mariupol, which has seen some of the war's heaviest fighting and armament, and where some 170,000 people are trapped with scarce food and water. "We cook what we find among neighbors. A bit of cabbage, a bit more of potatoes, we've found tomato paste, some beetroot," said former steel worker Victor from Mariupol. "They cook using a rudimentary barbecue and sleep in a basement, which he termed their peaceful oasis." Russian forces have taken half of the strategic port city, an advisor to Mr. Zelensky said on Wednesday. Russia says it is carrying out a special operation to disarm and denazify its neighbor. Western countries say Moscow's invasion was entirely unprovoked. The city market in Chernihiv, Ukraine, is seen damaged after shelling on the 30th of March 2022. Source: AP. Peace talks. The fate of the southeastern Donbass region, which Russia demands Ukraine cede to the separatists, was a topic of discussion at peace talks held on Tuesday at an Istanbul palace. A senior Ukrainian negotiator said the talks will resume online on Friday. Ukraine has sought a ceasefire without compromising on territory or sovereignty, though it has proposed adopting a neutral status in exchange for security guarantees. Russia opposes Ukraine joining and has cited its potential membership as a reason for the invasion. Western sanctions imposed on Russia as punishment for its invasion have largely isolated its economy from world trade, but Moscow is still the biggest supplier of oil and gas to Europe. A soldier walks past a shopping center in Kiev, Ukraine, that was destroyed by shelling in late March. Source: AAP. Rodrigo Abd. Seeking to exert its leverage, Russia demanded oil and gas payments be made in rubles by Friday, raising fears of energy shortages and boosting recessionary risks in Europe. Germany has warned of a possible emergency if Russia cuts supplies. Floating a potential compromise, Mr. Putin told German Chancellor Olaf Scholz that payments could be made in euros and sent to Gazprombank, which would convert the money to rubles, a German government spokesperson said. Scholz did not agree to this procedure in the conversation, but asked for written information to better understand the procedure, the spokesperson said. Gazprombank, one of the main channels for payments for Russian oil and gas, is not subject to EU sanctions. But global restrictions on exports to Russia over its invasion have shut down a carmaker, halted work on tanks, and cut off a Russian computer maker's access to circuits used in communications equipment, a US official said. Necessity brought together this unprecedented collaboration on export controls and other measures that are having a meaningful impact on Putin's war, said Thea Kendler, an official with the US Commerce Department. Russia says the West has effectively declared economic war on Russia, and so it will now turn eastwards, away from Europe, to build a partnership with China. Mr. Fleming said there were risks to both Russia and China in being too closely aligned. Russia understands that long-term, China will become increasingly strong militarily and economically, Mr. Fleming said. Some of their interests conflict. Russia could be squeezed out of the equation, he said.